Welcome! August is Black Philanthropy Month, and we're excited to celebrate and uplift this occasion with you. What is Black philanthropy? It is ancestral. It is about prioritizing community well-being and collective progress. Today's panel discussion is the first in a series of 3 conversations, virtual conversations, and in the spirit of philanthropy, we'll be talking about community care today. I'm Andrea Caupain Sanderson, and I'm your host and moderator for today. I'm one of 4 architects of the Black Future Co-op Fund, a first of its kind fund in Washington state, created by and for Black Washingtonians to ignite generational wealth, health, and well-being. I'm also the CEO of Byrd Barr Place, a historically Black organization in Seattle's Central District, leading programs and advocacy that empower people to live healthy, prosperous lives. And I'm also one of the 4 co-founders of the BIPOC Executive Directors Coalition, a collective of over 200 BIPOC nonprofit leaders working in solidarity to promote wellness and restore resources to our communities throughout Washington state. Before we get started, for our guests who would like closed captioning, auto-generated captions are available on Facebook. Please turn them on in your settings. One of our core principles at the Black Future Co-op Fund is our commitment to being good ancestors. And as we model this by acknowledging that the land upon which we are currently on is the unceded land of the Duwamish and Coast Salish people, home to the Duwamish, Squamish, Snoqualmie, Tulalip, Muckleshoot, and Puyallup nations. We also recognize and acknowledge the labor with which this country was built on the labor of enslaved people who were kidnapped and brought to the US from the continent of Africa. And we recognize the continuous contribution of our ancestors and survivors. We also acknowledge all immigrant labor, including voluntary, involuntary, trafficked, forced, and undocumented people who contributed to the building of this country and continue to serve within our labor force. We acknowledge the trauma both experienced and witnessed of all Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and our enduring spirit as well as our resilience. Black Philanthropy Month is an inclusive opportunity to illuminate the ingenuity and transformative impact of Black generosity and encourage increased investment in Black communities. Historically, Black people have been considered mostly as beneficiaries rather than contributive to the philanthropic field. We aim to change this view with the lifting up of Black Philanthropy Month and the examination through discussions we'll be rolling out. Black Philanthropy Month was started by Dr. Jackie Bouvier Copeland and the Pan-African Women's Philanthropy Network in 2011, and it is recognized worldwide. This is the first year organizers in our state, which includes Threshold Philanthropy, ESK Family Fund, Renton Regional Community Foundation, Philanthropy Northwest, Seattle Foundation, and of course the Black Future Co-op Fund have come together to support this intentional focus for our community. Our Washington State Governor Jay Inslee and Seattle's Mayor Jenny Durkin, as well as the Seattle City Council, have all officially proclaimed August as Black Philanthropy Month. As organizers of Black Philanthropy Month, our goals are to lift up the rich legacy of Black philanthropy, reclaiming what has been co-opted, and to inspire increased investment in Black communities, shifting the philanthropic paradigm and expanding Black philanthropy's model of generosity. We want to highlight that this work is rooted in our ancestral African culture and traditions of communal giving and sharing. These are the traditions that have traveled across the Atlantic during the slave trade and inhabits the practice of helping each other, which was essential to our ancestors' survival. Today, in the face of discriminatory policies, racist institutions, and persistent anti-Black violence, Black communities continue to create ways to take care of ourselves. We know that Black prosperity requires intentional, significant investment. And by coming together through this partnership for Black Philanthropy Month, we want to be able to collectively strengthen investment in Black well-being. At the Black Future Co-op Fund, we see shifting the philanthropic paradigm as central to our work. As a Black fund, we aim to define for ourselves, to speak for ourselves, and to create for ourselves a new model of philanthropy that is rooted in the beauty, soulfulness, and strength of Blackness. Our vision is a Washington state working cooperatively, where all Black people are liberated, prosperous, and self-determined to fully live our lives. Philanthropy is essentially that realization for us. And you'll hear today, philanthropy has always been present in the Black community. Today's panel, along with the other sessions, are designed to demystify the world of philanthropy by elevating our role in this sector and to move towards Black abundance. This panel, Black Philanthropy is Community Care, will ground us in the ways that the Black community has exercised philanthropy over time. Though we may not always call it philanthropy, giving is embedded in Black culture. It's foundational to who we are as Black people. Let me introduce our panel today, and in doing so, acknowledge that my brief introductions in no way represent the totality of their history and contributions to community. They're here to talk about the many facets of Black philanthropy. I'll start with Frankie Manning. Frankie is a member of the executive board of the Mary Mahoney Professional Nurses Organization, which was first founded in 1949 as the Mary Mahoney Registered Nurse Club, named after the first African-American nurse graduate in the United States in 1879. Frankie also manages the Mary Mahoney Professional Nurses Organization's outreach program. Next is Mattie Mooney. Mattie is co-founder of the Trans Women of Color Solidarity Network, a mutual aid network supporting and upholding self-determination of two-spirit trans women and trans femmes of color. Next is Doug Baldwin. Doug is a former wide receiver for the Seattle Seahawks, who now spends his time working to realize his vision of building the Family First Community Center in Renton, a new recreational facility to support families with their education, fitness, and overall health goals. And Louis Rudd. Louis is the president and co-founder of Ezel's Famous Chicken, which has grown to 16 locations since he and his family started the business in 1984. He's an active volunteer in the community, giving motivational speeches to young people, serving on the board of Tabor 100 through Ezel's, feeding attendees at the annual Martin Luther King Jr. marches, supporting cancer research, and much more. A hearty thank you to our panelists for joining us and sharing your stories of philanthropy today. We'll start with some moderated questions, and then I'll open it up for questions from the audience. For generations, we've continued to create ways to take care of our communities in the face of anti-Black racism and violence. The Black church, educational funds, and scholarships, fraternities, sororities, and mutual aids are bedrocks of Black culture. Frankie, I'll start with you. How has the Mary Mahoney Nurses Association played a role in supporting the advancement of Black women and men in the field of medicine?
Oh, thank you. And I'm delighted to be with all of you today because this question and this subject is something that our founders started in 1949. These were women who migrated from the South to Seattle, primarily to seek a better life. When they got here, they discovered they could not find employment as nurses. So they ended up working at Harborview as nursing assistants, lab technicians, and other ways. When our founder, Miss Baker, looked around and she see all of these women and she began to learn they were registered nurses, but no job, no place in Seattle would hire them. So she helped them to get licensed in the state of Washington. And in that process, they looked around and they said, how can we have more people who look like us? And they formed the Mary Mahoney Professional Nurses Club. And one of their first missions was to look to see how could they support other nurses to become nurses financially, emotionally, etc. And so the first goals of the organization was to provide scholarships. These ladies didn't have a lot of money, but what they did was they sold chicken dinners and they had bake sales and car washes, took the nursing students to places where they could get their hair done and different things. But along the way, their first scholarship was given in 1951. They also learned at that time they could not get into school. So the University of Washington did not allow them to go to school until in 1951. But what they were able to do was to help fund their first scholarship in 1951 through their efforts of selling dinners and bake sales, etc. And that began our legacy where we are today, where we not only continue to give scholarships, but we mentor students and we serve our community, which was the second goal of the Mary Mahoney Club, was to help improve the health of our community. And they started that in 1949. We continue that effort today. So we not only give funds and mentor our students, but we want to increase the number of African heritage nurses in the population that you can see in health services. So when you go to get care at healthcare institutions, you will see people who look like you.
Thank you, Frankie. I love how you laid out several pillars, right, of well-being: economic security, civic engagement, but also health equity. Mattie, share with us about the critical role giving and philanthropy play in your network's ability to achieve the solidarity being sought.
So at Trans Women of Color Solidarity Network, we recognize that as Black folks and as people of color, as trans and queer folks, that we have historically had to provide community care for one another in order to thrive and survive and move towards collective liberation. So this work that we do is, to us, a cultural imperative, right? We know that specifically in trans and in queer communities, we've always created networks of supporting each other, much like much like racial groups have had to create networks and support systems when institutions worked actively to keep them out due to white supremacy, right? And we know that the same things are at play for queer and trans folks. And so, it's our gift, in our opinion, shared with us by our ancestors, and a gift that is shared through us for the benefit of the liberation of our communities and our liberation as well. There is a lot that that comes with this work. I'm probably veering off from the question here. There's a lot that comes with this work. I want to say that the work that we do is work that we don't get paid for. We do this. We all have day jobs, and we also do this work full time. We support community members 24/7. Right now, we're supporting a community member who is actively struggling with drug addiction and mental health issues. And to us, that is how we give of ourselves to community, and how we share the love that we have for our community is by being there. Does that answer the question, or did I kind of veer?
No, you answered the question. I love that you went into what exactly that looks like today. I love that you touched on earlier that this work truly is ancestral. So it tackled the question. Doug, please share with us the story of the Family First Community Center and the genesis for starting the foundation.
Yeah, so when I got here in 2011, in Renton specifically, I used to go eat in this spot called Mama's Teriyaki in Renton. And if you know anything about this spot, it was a hub for the community. And I ate there all the time. And when I would go there, there was always kids hanging out, all kinds of ages, right? And mostly high school kids. And I just, I didn't know any better. So I was just hanging out with them, right? They were doing their homework and just hanging out in the lobby and outside the building. And of course, eating the teriyaki because it was great. But one day I asked the lady who ran the restaurant, I said, why are the kids hanging out here? She said, I don't know. They just like hanging out here, and they eat the food. They don't bother me. So I let them stay. And so I asked the kids, I was like, where's the nearest basketball court? Because I'm a basketball fan. I wanted to play basketball. And it was further away than I had hoped for it to be. And so I guess in a number of conversations and just trying to figure out what kind of impact I wanted to have in the community while I was here, I thought of the idea of bringing a community center to the area. Now, I say community center. I really don't like calling it a community center because there's, a certain preconceived notion that comes with that phrase. It's really a community hub. And the genesis for that idea, it came from where I grew up. I grew up in the back end of the Salvation Army. My mom, she worked in the front part, in the administrative part of the Salvation Army. And so I was in the back, which was the community center. In that environment, that space, it was like my second home. It was a place where I could go and be a kid. I could learn. I had tutors. I had mentors. I could genuinely be a kid and feel safe and feel seen. And so this community center that we're building in Renton is just that. And, it's going to be a state-of-the-art facility just because we have the resources and we have the technology now. And so we're bringing that community hub that I experienced back home in Florida, we're bringing that to the 21st century. And so this community center is, again, not just a community center in the traditional sense. We are going to have athletic resources and opportunities. We have a basketball gym, of course, but we also partner with Health Point. So they're going to have a clinic, a 1,500 square foot clinic in the community center. We're going to do cooking and eating classes, diabetes prevention classes. We have a demo kitchen to provide all of that, financial literacy classes. And then we also have a maker space in there that we're going to fill with technology so that the students who are going to be going to the school right next door can come over and use that technology. The idea and the concept of this is that, yes, we're going to build a state-of-the-art facility, but it's not just about the facility, right? This is a place where kids and families can come and be seen, be recognized for who they are, be loved, and be recognized as a member and part of the community. And I think that's the environment that we're trying to create. It's just a space where people can really be understand, be seen and be loved and be understood for who they are. And so aside from all the wonderful things that we are actually putting into the facility, it's really about the environment that we're creating with the staff and with the mindfulness that we have in building this culture in this environment. And that's exactly what I experienced back home in Florida. The impact that had on me was profound. Obviously, that was where I started my athletic career. But more importantly than that, that was where I built the foundation and the core for who I am as a man today and who I am trying to become in the future. I have 2 daughters, and a lot of the things and the teachings that I learned back there in Florida at that community center, I still apply to my life today. Trying to be the best human being that I can, aside from all the other things that really at the end of the day are kind of irrelevant, right? Like, you can be as rich as you want to be, you can be as famous as you want to be, but if you're not a good person, if you're not treating people like other human beings with respect and with dignity and with love, then it doesn't mean anything. And so this community center is going to model that and demonstrate that in the best ways that we know how. And really, that's just to show love.
Thank you, Doug. That's powerful, right? We're looking forward to seeing that center come alive, that hub come alive in South King County. I appreciate the hospitality that you're embedding in the culture of what the services that will be provided there, but also that strong sense of self and belonging that will be created for people who will be using the hub. So thank you. Louis, can you speak to the role of business in philanthropy and community giving? What is this new exciting endeavor you just launched, and how does it fit with your philosophy of philanthropy?
Well, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to be here and share some of the Ezel's story. And what I look at is a partnership between business and community. And I can think about many partnerships that we formed over the years since we've been in business at Ezel's. And, a couple come to mind, the partnership with the MLK committee, where we started out providing chicken for those that participated in the march. I think the first time we did it, it was 100 pieces of chicken. The last time they had a march there, we provided over 2,000 pieces of chicken for those that participated in the march. And it started out, between myself and Eddie as sort of a joke. Hey, Eddie, what if I bring over a leg for each one of the participants to give them an extra leg to walk on, to encourage them to walk that distance down Empire Way at the time before it became Martin Luther King Jr. Way. But anyway, there's other partnerships. I think about our 25th anniversary, where the theme was as it takes a village to raise a kid, it takes a community to raise a business, right? And there's a partnership there again. And we gave out pillars for those individuals and organizations in the community that made it possible for Ezell's to exist today. And there was at least 18 of those awards that we gave out. And it was more about those people and those individuals that supported us and helped us through those challenging times and helped to elevate the business to the successes that we were able to achieve. And, you know, there's a couple that come to mind now when I think about the partnerships. One of the first employees that worked at Ezell's, Jamie Elmore, who would go on to start her own business as a salon operator and owner. And then she would start a nonprofit to focus on supporting those that were suffering from a disease called alopecia that I was not familiar with. And she came to me at one point because she had encountered a situation where there was a young female struggling with that disease that was suicidal. And she said, brother, what she called me, I need to help this young lady. And of course, we helped her to bring that young lady to Seattle and mentor her, prepare her for the rest of her life. She went back, attended her prom, graduated high school, and now she's an advocate for alopecia. I also serve on Jamie's board now. So again, these partnerships develop over time, but that's really what it means. And then to talk about this initiative, when I was a kid growing up, my grandparents, my parents, anything that would hurt, they would practically say, come here, let me rub that for you, right? Put a little rub on it. So we started an initiative that we just launched called the RUB Initiative, the RUD's RUB Initiative, Raising Up Black Businesses. There's a direct relationship between wealth building and Black-owned businesses in our community. And I think that, I know that there needs to be more focus and support for small Black-owned businesses. So that's what this initiative will be focusing on, is helping to support small Black-owned businesses. So DoorDash became a partner, a charter partner in this endeavor, and donated the first funds. And we've since had other partners that we call Partners in Prosperity join us. To name a few, Cisco, Pepsi, Barr Green Ellison, they've all contributed funds because they understand the importance of supporting Black-owned businesses to generate wealth that will go further into impacting education, medical, the benefits are enormous through partnerships with businesses in the Black community. I can go on, but I'll stop there.
Thank you, Louis. No, it's been transformative what Ezell's and the business has done for our Black community and beyond even, right? Inspiring others to be part of community and inspiring what third places can look like for our community. So my next set of questions will be for each of the panelists, and we'll go back and start with Frankie. How did your upbringing influence and inspire your philanthropy today? Any particular people or stories stand out for you as shaping your giving?
Well, I have to tell you that I was fortunate to grow up in a small community where it was an all Black community. And in that small Black community, where in my family we had 10 children, and my parents and the people in that community, there was always the opportunity to give and to serve. And although we were not wealthy, we didn't have a lot of money, but we raised our garden and our food. And so there was always giving to other people who had less than. But also we were fortunate in the community to have people who gave and supported us. You know, I often think about today when my children were small about that often I needed a babysitter, where when I was a child, there was always someone available in my community to look after us. And so my parents didn't have to hire babysitters. So I grew up with the whole concept that it takes a whole village, as Lewis says, to raise a child. And I was fortunate to always have the things that I needed, no matter where I was. And my parents used to say, we give because we have 10 of you, and we never know where you will be. And I've been all over the United States and parts of the world, and I've never been without our need. So the gift of giving, I learned as a child in my community and in my home. And that's why I believe in it today. And I'm fortunate to be a part of Mary Mahoney because we give to our students and to our community. We partnered with New Beginnings Church and with Center for Multicultural Health to get vaccines out to our people. We do barbershop blood pressures to help keep our people healthy, because we know if you are ill, you cannot earn money or anything else, nor can you give to others. So I've been fortunate all my life to be a part of the gift of giving to others, but also receiving gifts from others.
Thank you. Thank you, Frankie. Mattie, I'll turn to you next, and I'll repeat the question. How did your upbringing influence and inspire your philanthropy today? Was there anyone in your life or stories that stand out for you in shaping your giving?
Yes, and I'm gonna try not to. I'm gonna try not to cry during this. So the first part of my life, I grew up in Beaumont, Texas. My dad, was an African immigrant. He came to this country with 18. Well, when he was 18, with less than $10 in his pocket, and worked, as a janitor at a high school, and then as an attendant at a car wash. And then, eventually him and my mom got divorced, and I lived with my mom, and we were poor. There were times where I would see my mom go without food just so that me and my brother had food to eat. There was like a little bar down the corner that I remember my little brother and I would walk to, and the guy who owned the bar would give us a quarter to kind of pick up garbage outside, and it's those experiences of really extreme poverty, and the way that my mom dealt with those situations. My mom, when I was younger, just was like a god to me. She was so kind and so caring, and I never heard her complain, and I never heard her be angry about our situation. She was always so loving. And I often talk about, also, I have a child, and I often talk about how my mom also taught me how to be a parent, a loving parent, a parent that's there to guide instead of, take frustrations out on us or anything like that. And I think that my mom's giving nature, and just the way that my mom was so nurturing to us, and so understanding, and just would give, literally, this is cliche, but just the shirt off of her back, if someone needed it, right? Even though we were in this situation where, sometimes we lived in a car, sometimes we came home I remember we came home once and the landlord was putting our stuff out on the front yard. She is just my rock, and she has been that. And she is truly the person that instilled in me that it doesn't matter how much you have, it doesn't matter how little you have. There's always something that you can do to help somebody else. And it is always, your responsibility as a human being, to do something for other people, even if you don't have much, right? And so that's always been something that's stuck with me. It's always been something that made me feel really connected to my mom. Even in this work, and doing the work that I do, it still just creates this incredible bond between my mom and myself, to be able to provide for others or be able to love my community through giving to my community.
Oh, thank you, Mattie. Doug, how did your upbringing influence and inspire your philanthropy today? And who comes to mind, if anyone, are stories that stand out for you in shaping your giving?
Yeah, first, Mattie, I want to say thank you for sharing that story because that really resonates with me. My grandfather was very similar in that way. He's, God bless his soul, he passed away a couple years ago, but he was just instrumental and foundational to the person that I am today, right? Like my grandfather, he was in the military, and he worked at the BX when he retired from the military, and he would walk around on the BX and in the community, and everybody would call him JV. His first name was Junius, last name was Bowling, and so they just call him JV, and everybody loved him, and I want my friends to call me DB because it's a direct correlation and response to what my grandfather taught me, and which was you just be thoughtful and considerate to other people. You just be loving, regardless of who they are, what they look like, where they come from, their experience. None of that stuff matters. They're still human beings on this planet trying to survive and thrive. And if you can look at them like that, just look at people as with the lens of love. And my grandfather taught me that. And I think the reason why so many people loved him, why so many people showed up to his funeral when he passed away, was because he embodied that spirit of love, and people recognize that. And I want to model after that. I want to be like that. I want to show my children what that's like. And so that's the core. That's the foundation. There's another story, and this is related to sports. It was my high school sophomore year, and we just got done playing a game. It was the day after the game. We're watching the film. I scored a touchdown. It was my first touchdown in high school, so I'm elated. I'm excited, right? And I got to be honest, I was pretty arrogant at this time, right? I was a very cocky, confident young male. And we come into the meeting the next day, and the coach just starts ripping me. And he's pointing out all the things that I did wrong that day in the game. And granted, I thought I did well, right? And then he says, it's like we're playing with 10 guys on the field. And again, this was in high school. And so, a lot of people don't remember a lot of stories. I don't remember a lot of situations that I was in at this time in my career or my life. But that moment really stood out to me because I told myself in that moment that I would never be a liability again. And I recognize now that, yes, there was some negative thoughts that were going on in my head about myself. But as I've matured and grown and taken the time to look at what that situation has done to me, I really look at it as that now I see everybody as having a role. Whether you're on a football team, you're in a family, or you're in the community, everybody has a role. And everybody has to take responsibility for the role and take pride in their role. And that your role is vital to the success of not only the football team or your family or the community, but also to you as an individual. And so, in that moment, I told myself I would never be a liability. But now as I tell myself I have a role to play with my family in the community, and I want to be as the best version of myself that I can be, so that my daughters can benefit from that, so that my wife can benefit from that, so that the work that I do out in the community will be genuine, be authentic, be wholesome, and be sustainable. And I can only do that if I know my role and if I take pride in my role, and I'm trying to better myself in the essence of trying to do that role. And so those are two things that have, through my upbringing, have directed and guided who I am today and who I'm trying to become in the future.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you for sharing both of those stories. Louis, how did your upbringing influence and inspire your philanthropy today? And please share anything about people or stories that come to mind in shaping your giving.
Well, I have a lot in common with all of the speakers before me who had great stories to share. And, for me, it started with my dad. And as, Frankie would be one of 10. It's 10 siblings in my family as well. We were the dirty dozen coming up, 5 guys and 5 girls. And my dad had the nickname Good Buddy. And growing up in Texas, as Mattie did, there was certain values that were instilled in us as kids in that village that we grew up in, while some had chicken and eggs, others had beef and meat. And, you know, at Christmas time and at different holidays, it was always families coming together and sharing and caring. So we just grew up in a very loving, caring environment. And again, my dad, the nickname Good Buddy, he always instilled upon us how to be respectful, giving, and caring. And if someone needed something, you have to be there for them. And that carried on, you know. And when we started the business, it was always about relationships. And at the very core, our value statement states relationships, loyalty, and honesty. And in all relationships, that has to happen. You have to have a high level of loyalty and honesty and great communication. And so we learned that as kids growing up, and that's been at the very core of our values in the business place.
Thank you, Louis. And I won't let you go so quickly. I'll be going back now in opposite order. So I'll have you answer this question first.
Okay.
We've heard, you know, over time, over the history of our people in society, in this nation in particular, and the varying different experiences that we've had, what examples come to mind for you when you think about the legacy of Black giving and philanthropy?
Well, you know, that's one that I haven't given much thought to. But when I think about legacy, I think about, you know, the legacy that I want to leave, or the legacy that, you know, Ezell's want to leave. For example, our 35th anniversary a couple of years back, the theme of that anniversary was legends and legacies. And we spent the first 35 years building a brand and being all about making sure that we provided a good product and some good services. From that point forward, we really wanted to shift the focus to a legacy that we leave, an impact on the communities that we served and beyond those. And so, you know, understanding the challenges in the Black community, we wanted to be able to be very impactful in supporting those grassroots organizations that are out there trying to stop the violence and bridge the gap, the wealth gap, right? And move away from a dependency on the welfare system and being more independent and having wealth and having opportunities to be self-sufficient and sustainable in businesses. So that legacy piece for me and my family and for the business, that's what comes to mind right now when I hear the word legacy. You know, long after Louis Rudd is gone, the impact that he had on the communities that he served should be about, you know, positive change and, you know, opportunities for growth.
Thank you. Yes, Louis, I say thank you for contributing to the legacy and tradition of Black giving and philanthropy. Doug, I'll punt the question to you. What examples come to mind when you think about the rich legacy of Black giving and philanthropy?
Yeah, I don't know if I can summarize with just a few examples, but what I feel when I think about the legacy of Black giving and philanthropy is the authenticity of it, right? And the genuine grounding of the giving, the philanthropy, the community. And I think that's, you know, it's evident because it's part of our history, it's part of our culture, right? As the Black community, especially in America, we've had to go through so many trials and tribulations to get to a point where we are now, and we're still not to where we want to be and where we need to get to. And in order to get to where we are today, it had to be a collective. It had to be a genuine connection between all of us in our community to uplift each other and to challenge each other and to push each other to get to where we are today. I mean, that's what I feel like the legacy is. You know, aside from all the wonderful, tangible things that we can talk about, it's more so for me, and I'm just, you know, I'm always going to repeat this. It's always about the essence of the impact, the intent behind the decisions. There's other cultures, there's other demographics that, you know, are celebrated for their philanthropy, but don't have the historical context that we do. And in order for the impact to have been as effective, as impactful, and as sustainable as Lewis was talking about earlier, it had to be genuine. It had to be honest. It had to be grounded. And a lot of times that means that there's not a lot of fanfare for that. It's not about the fanfare or the attention. It's about the work, right? And sometimes that's just the case. We don't know so much about the rich legacy of Black giving and philanthropy. It's not readily available. It's not easily read about in our history books, right? But that doesn't mean it's not there. And we know it's there because of the impact that our ancestors and those who have come before us, the impact that they had on our lives in order for us to be able to do what we're doing today. And to Lewis's point, we can't allow that legacy to be in vain. We have a role to play today. We have a mission that we have to accomplish, that we have to set out and towards and work towards. And so that legacy that came before us doesn't go in vain. And so that we set up the next foundation for the next generation to come. So in my eyes, the legacy is more so about who we are as human beings, who we are as a community, and the work that we've had to do, the struggle we've had to go through to get to this point.
I appreciate that. I really appreciate you underscoring integrity in giving, right? And even then the togetherness. I appreciate that. Frankie, what examples come to mind when you think about the rich legacy of giving and philanthropy in the Black community?
Well, a lot of stories come to mind. When you get old, you have lots of stories. But I first want to call out an observation. 3 of us are from Texas, and that within the state of Texas, they've created some good people who really understand the value of giving. And Doug is from Florida, so we're all Southerners here today. But I have to tell you that 2 things come to mind that I'll share with you. One is when I was in nursing school, being a poor girl away from home, I always recall my uncle, who did not finish grade school, would send me a letter. And in that letter, it would be a dollar bill. And it always said, behind every dark cloud, there's sunshine. I remember that today. But what I could do with that dollar was get me some Royal Crown, a pint of ice cream, some deodorant, and have a few cents left over. And I never have forgotten that dollar. And when I get frustrated and distressed, I think about that gift that he gave me to encourage me to continue in school, because sometimes it was really just tough. But the other one is the legacy of my own organization of the Mahoney nurses. So these ladies created an opportunity for us to not just give money to people, but the value of mentoring people and the value of caring for our community. And one of the things that we have done as we have gone along with our giving was one of our members determined that we absolutely would not want to continue to try to cook dinners and have car washes and bake sales in order to support people in the future, because the number of Black nurses remains about where they were in 1957. But we needed to have a supportive structure, both financially and emotionally. So that's why our mentors program is so strong. But in addition to that, we needed to find a way to create an endowment, which has really been a hallmark will create a way to support students on into perpetuity was the goal of that. But more importantly, we want our students to understand what our values are so that they will come back and help support other people and help create more nurses and support them on into the future. That's what I learned as a child. That's what this organization does. And this is what my hope is to the future. As we look to the nurses graduating, going on into the future, they will reach back and they will mentor other people. and they will continue the legacy of giving and supporting because there are tough times, not just in the past, but on into the future.
Thank you, Frankie. And I thank you for circling your response back to care for community. Mattie, we'll close this question out with you. What examples come to mind when you think about the rich legacy of Black giving and philanthropy?
So I don't know that I have any specific examples. I do want to mention that just hearing, that other Black folks are out there doing this work makes me really happy. It makes me, see that like we've upheld this tradition, right? In spite of our history. And I think that I feel like Black folks have been very purposefully disconnected from culture, right? The culture from whence we all came, and giving is one way that folks have developed to kind of keep those spiritual lines open, and it's a testament to who our people were, who we want to be. And giving is also, I want to mention, a very deeply political act in a violently capitalist system. It's a way for us to push back against a system that systemically disenfranchises us and suppresses our economic development as a people. And so I just want to say that I'm deeply honored to be here around other folks who are doing the same thing and find importance in giving to our community.
Mattie, I appreciate your sentiment around supporting each other. There's so much different types of action and giving that's happening in our community that we don't want to compete with one another, right? We want to fulfill each other. So I appreciate you pointing that out and highlighting that. So we have one last question for our panelists before we open it up to the audience. And I'll start with Lewis. We've heard time and time again, giving of your time, talent, and treasure. What does that mean for you when we hear time, talent, and treasure in our community? What comes to mind for you?
Well, I think a combination of the three, right? When you combine the time that you have to give with your talent, the result is a treasure, right? And for years, I've been given freely of my time as I've continually developed my talents. And, there's a scripture that speaks about, what happens when you don't use your talents and when you use your talents to multiply. Well, I want to make sure that the rest of my life, I spend my time developing my talents and multiplying so that that treasure that others receive is beneficial and it goes a long ways, and so there's definitely a direct connection and relationship between the three. And I think, again, when we apply our time in ways that are productive and we develop our talents, the treasure is great. And that's what it should be about in life, the treasure from our time and talent that we share with others in life. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Hear, hear. Frankie, tell us about what comes to mind for you when we say in our Black community, time, talent, and treasure.
Well, I have to tell you, when I give my time, talents, and treasure, it's about often what I receive back. Sometimes I receive more than I give. And so the value of giving time to others where they need it, my so sometimes I do not have treasures to give, but I have time. And so the time to listen and to work with others is sometimes as valuable as the money that I can give. So it means a lot to me but it also is a gift that I think that I receive more from others than I often give. But it's important, I think, that we share.
Thank you for that. Doug, what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, when I hear the word treasure, I think about a verse that says, "For where your treasure is, your heart also will be." And, treasure, I think it can mean a number of different things to different people. But when I hear treasure, I think about, what do I treasure? What do I value? And if if I place a high value on something, if I treasure it, that's also where my heart will be. That's where my time and my talent will be. And so when I hear giving my treasure, it's like, what do I care about? If I'm being honest, my most important treasure on this planet is my wife and my kids. And I know that may sound like, how does that translate to philanthropy or to Black giving? It's like, look, my family is what I care about. And in order for my family to be healthy and to be thriving, I have to be out in the community. I have to be sharing my treasure, my time, and my talents to impact my community in a positive way. And so to me, what that means is, going back to what I said earlier, we all have a role. You all have a skill set. We all have things that we were blessed with that, we didn't decide to have when we were brought into this world. And now we have those things, and we can't waste those talents. And it's our job to cultivate and to really take the time to figure out what we're passionate about, what's the skill set that we have that can then facilitate that passion in a constructive, positive way for the well-being of all, and then go out there and do it. And so when I hear treasure, I internalize that into thinking, where am I supposed to be? Where am I supposed to be in the bigger picture? And how am I using all of the things that I've been blessed with to do that, to be impactful in a positive way? That's what I hear when I hear you say that.
Thank you. Mattie, we'll round this question out with you. What comes to mind for you when you think of time, talent, and treasure?
Okay. So I think when I think of time, talent, and treasure, I think about all of the time, talent, and treasure that often is not provided to specifically LGBTQ and trans communities. And I think that I would be remiss if I didn't bring this up. I think that there are so many people with so many skills doing so many amazing things. And, the community that I'm a part of, the LGBTQ community, the trans community specifically also, we have a deficit in folks willing and wanting to provide and to support our communities, both financially and with other resources. I think that one thing that we don't often discuss within our communities, and sorry for going off on a tangent, is the reach of white supremacy in respects to the ways that we enact the conditioning of white supremacy on the LGBTQ community and the trans community via the strict adherence and violent enforcement of gender roles and sexuality. Part of our work at Trans Women of Color Solidarity Network, in addition to giving financial resources and social service resources, is also having these difficult conversations and also giving our time, our talent, and our treasure regarding our community and what we've learned in being in philanthropy and what we've learned in all being folks who work as a part of nonprofits. And that means interrogating white supremacy's impact on how we as Black folks treat each other, specifically the most marginalized among us, because we cannot be free collectively unless we are supporting, right, with our philanthropy and with our time and with our treasures and with our skills and fighting for the collective liberation and safety and right to life and existence of all of us, right? Black liberation and these ideals that we all believe in and seeing and creating a thriving community cannot exist unless we are also being intersectional and looking at how unique and multifaceted that Black folks are, and in looking at all of the identities that can make up the Black experience. And I just wanted to mention that because we are in philanthropy, and our collective started to address specifically the lack of giving to our communities. Less than 1% of all grant funds go to LGBTQ and trans organizations. And so when you think about the amount of those organizations that are specifically Black or specifically folks of color, it's even less than 1%, right? And so a lot of the giving that we do is literally giving that comes to us via donations from our community that goes right back out to the community, or grants that are specifically geared towards LGBTQ or trans folks, right? And even those, oftentimes, you know, it's a rat race to get those, and it's created a very scarcity mentality. And so I just kind of want to bring awareness to the fact that if we're going to be doing giving right, and we're going to be supporting our communities, that we need to really look at and address the way that we are supporting every facet of our community.
Thank you for that. It isn't lost on us that there's much work to be done within our communities, Mattie, within our Black community, as we work across our community with other communities of color and our white communities. So I appreciate you underscoring that. And you're right, less than 10% of all philanthropic dollars nationally go to organizations of color, much less to Black organizations, much less to LGBTQ and trans organizations. So I also appreciate you highlighting that. We'll now turn and take questions from the audience. We have a question that I believe is for Louis. Monica says, where can we find more information on the Black Business Support Initiative? Louis, I believe you're muted.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Yes, there will be information available on the Ezel's website. And also you can send a request for information to RUBB at ezelsfamouschicken.com.
Thank you. Another question from Kevin. I often say you don't get engagement without orientation. How can we orient our community to recognize that we are already doing this through church, sororities, fraternities, and clubs, etc.? Who would like to take that question?
I think that many of the organizations in our community have websites and web pages that people can learn about. They can also talk to people that they know who may know someone in the community who will help them to understand what's available in the community for giving and also participating in it. Of course, there are lots of churches that you can hear. You can almost drive out and about in the community and see those.
Would anyone else like to?
Quite understood the question, but that's one way that people look out and try to get those.
Would any other panelists like to take the question?
Louis, did you want to go?
Well, yeah, I'll go. I just had a comment as opposed to maybe an answer to the question. I would think that most people are already aware. I think the challenge is how can we increase the amount of philanthropy that takes place within the Black community so that there's more to go around? And how can we encourage more people to participate? I think that's the question that I would have. That doesn't answer that question, but go right ahead.
Doug?
Can I jump in real quick? Because I feel strongly about this one. And Kevin, if you're listening, I'm going to challenge you a little bit. You say, how can we orientate our community to recognize that we're already doing this? And I don't think our purpose is to orientate our community to recognize anything. I think our job is just to be who we are in the community, to model what we want our community to look like. if we don't do that, if we don't model it, if we're not focused on what we have to do and what's right in front of us, then, you know, we're going to continuously run our head around trying to get other people to recognize what we're doing or recognize the direction that we want them to go in, right? Like, throughout society, throughout our history as human beings, we've always had societal issues. We've always had problems in a number of different facets. So in order for us to change that, the question really is, are we going to change that by doing the same thing that we've been continuously doing? Or is it just that we have to live our lives and let the community see that what we're doing is beneficial to the community and being a model for it? Like my grandfather, you know, he wasn't trying to get me to recognize how he was living. He was just living. And by living, I recognized who he was and how he was living. And then that impacted me on a more sustainable level, which, you know, is impacting me to this day. Is going to impact my children. My children are going to be a certain way because of who my grandfather was. And that's just because of the way he was living, not trying to orientate or trying to focus his efforts on trying to get me to realize how he was living. He was just doing it. He was just modeling it.
Second part of that question from Kevin, how can we demystify the word philanthropy to help us target all donors, including small donors?
Well, I think, you know, what my thought would be is it's art of giving. And I do think that we give both our talents and treasures all the time. And small donors as important as large donors. My grandmother used to always tell us, 5 pennies make a nickel. Really important for us to learn that the value of a penny is important as a nickel. And so small donors are as important to us as large donors. In fact, in our Mary Mahoney, we have people who started giving to us in 1949 who sometimes can only give us $5 or $25 or $10. But what they do offer us is support that continues to encourage us to keep on doing what we do. And that's as important to us as $50,000 because we won't get many $50,000, but we will get more $5. And so I think small givers are as important as large givers.
I would like to add to that and just say that I think that, you know, just the term promoting the welfare of others as part of the definition for that term or the word philanthropy, right? There are a lot of people out there that are doing small things that have big impact that are maybe not being recognized. And in that respect, I agree that, you know, that needs to be publicized and make the headlines as well. And too many times those go without being noticed or talked about. And you take, for example, the Rub Initiative. The amount of awards that we're giving out are small in comparison to some of the larger corporations like Amazon and Microsoft and some of the other ones that have come up with initiatives to support Black businesses. But the impact that we're going to have in the community on the small businesses that I'm aware of, such as the Copy Mart that couldn't afford to pay for the machines that kept his business going, to be able to have an additional lease payment or two to sustain his business until things picked back up during the pandemic was very impactful for his business. It was a small thing, but it had a huge impact. This business that had been around for more than 3 decades now lives to be around for another 3 decades because of that bridge. So yes, I think the small donors are very valuable and just as valuable as the large donors. And then too many times it's just not acknowledged, but that doesn't diminish the value.
It also makes me think about, I don't know if Doug wants to speak to it, Doug's point earlier about giving with integrity,
Yes.
right? Which dovetails nicely to your point, Lewis, your motive for giving and the deeply dimensional connection that's created as a result of giving. You're not just giving just to see your name in lights or get
No.
accolades, right? You're giving because we are part of community. We want to have everyone thrive in our community. And I want to be a part of supporting that, even if I can only give $5. You're on mute, Doug.
Since you brought it up, I'll just jump in with the thought that how we can demystify it is I think philanthropy, it's a big word for what I believe is relationships, right? Like if we want to have an impact, I'll take the community center, for example, right? Like we had a lot of major donors donate to us so that we could build the community center. But the people who are going to make that facility what it is, those are the volunteers who, quite honestly, can't donate money, right? But they're donating their time, their talent, their treasure, right? Those are the people who make that environment what it is, that culture what it's going to be. And those are the people who are going to make the lasting impact that lasts longer than the building is going to be constructed for. At some point, that building is going to get old. The community center I grew up in, our gym was run down. We had the facility was barely working, but it wasn't about the facility. It was about the culture. It was about the people in there. So to me, when I hear how can we demystify the word philanthropy and help us recognize all donors, it's just being in a relationship. Regardless if the donor is donating $1 million or $5, they're still important. Just like Frankie said, the 5 pennies makes a nickel. The penny is just as valuable as the nickel. And if we see it that way, then maybe we can demystify it.
Hear, hear. Mattie, did you want to chime in? You're on mute
too, Mattie.
Okay, sorry, I was having a little trouble. No, I think that what everyone else said was really great. I also think too that when people think of philanthropy, in our society, that it brings up a very specific connotation. It brings up a very specific look or set of attributes. And I think that a big part of demystifying the word philanthropy is, even though we're not in this work to get accolades, but I think that sharing the work that that a lot of us are doing, and that other folks who are building those relationships and who are supporting community, sharing the work that they do and the importance of the work that they do is really important, right? Because we know that Bill Gates is not the only one doing philanthropy out here and giving back to certain communities, right? We know that Jeff Bezos or his ex-wife aren't the only folks out here giving money and giving time and sharing their talents with the world, right? And it's really a lot of the smaller collectives and donors and and just people and volunteers who are really making the biggest impact, in my opinion. And so I think one of the ways that we can kind of demystify that word is to put a different face on the word, right? And to put different experiences on that word, and to share the work and share the impact of the work, as was mentioned earlier, that folks are out here doing, because it is important work.
Thank you. Thank you. We all know that culture and arts play a pivotal and significant role in our society today. So this next question is from Michael. What can arts and culture philanthropy do to support the Black community? Who'd like to take that one?
I'll just make a comment. I don't think the question well, I shouldn't change this question. I will say, I believe that the arts and culture philanthropy is already doing a lot to support. And I mean, can it do more? Yes. But there's plenty of examples out there in the Black community of leaders in the community through the arts and culture that are making a huge difference and impact, especially with the young people out there. So I would say, you know, do a little research and find out who they are and join them and support them.
Anyone else?
I would agree with that. The more that support all parts of our community who are doing things to help the growth of the community, the better it'll be. That I agree with Louis. We all need to learn more about how each one of those are contributing to the growth of the community.
I'll chime in here. I think the arts and the culture that the Black community has demonstrated through art is really kind of the history pages that our children and our grandchildren and the future generations will look back upon and say, okay, what was going on during that time, right? Like, that's, to me, it's art is the expression of our reality through a different means. And the more that there's this vibrance of culture and art that comes out through the work that we're doing, that just enhances the education and the connective tissue between future generations and ourselves and the work that we're doing now. You know, we know about all the beautiful things that have been created and have been done and have been shared through art and the artists and the people who've created that art, and it's impacted us today. And Maya Angelou is one of the most impactful. I'm gonna call her an artist because that's what she is to me. She's an artist. She's one of the most impactful artists in my life, and I never met the woman, right? But I know that if going back to what I previously said, that we all have a role in this, and I think arts and culture, the role that they have in philanthropy is to continue to tell the story, continue to shine light on the experiences that we have in our community so that we don't forget it, and that we memorialize it in some ways. That's just as impactful as the volunteer who's going to be working at the community center, or the support that the Rub Foundation or Rub Initiative is going to provide small business owners. Again, it's all about the role that we have, and we all play a vital part of that in what the future looks like, in my opinion.
Thank you. Anyone else? I will put on my opinion hat briefly and also respond and say what arts and culture philanthropy can do is to stand guard to ensure that their truthful Black narratives are being lifted up about our community. So many anti-Black and overly negative and deficit-related narratives are being illustrated, whether it's in words, images, various other art forms, and standing guard at the gate to ensure that the full expression, yes, there have been times where Black people, and still do, we experience suffering, but there are times where we have, and we do experience health and well-being and vibrancy. And we want to see all of those expressions illustrated about our people. We have time for probably one or two more questions. The next question is for each panelist. Carol asks, what measures of success does each panelist use to determine whether their giving is really having an impact?
I'll start with within our organization, within Ezell's, we actually decided that to be more strategic in our giving and our support, that we should bring on a community outreach specialist, right? So that it's intentional. So we measure the impact before the action, and it's not left to chance. So by bringing on a community outreach specialist, her sole purpose is to look into opportunities where we can be impactful and then execute on those.
I could answer this one. So I think that one of the ways that we measure success and determine whether our giving is having an impact is that the Seattle queer and trans community is very small. We're like a giant couple thousand person family. Everyone's connected in some way, shape, or form. And I think that the way that we measure that impact is stories, right? Is seeing people thrive, is knowing that, you know, this couple $100 over here or this $1,000 there has gotten someone into housing, has paid someone's bills. You know, folks are always sharing with their friends and sharing with community about the work that we do. And, you know, and then we see these influxes of folks who are asking to utilize the fund. We often throw kind of community events. And so we hear about the success of our giving through those events as well. But we also recognize, right, that the methods of giving are not they're not sustainable, right? We have to make some sort of systemic change. And one of the ways that we are helping impart some of that systemic change is we are, you know, trying to create a housing network, right? We're in the process of trying to buy an apartment building, right? So that when folks come to us and say, hey, you know, we're trying to find housing, you know, we have somewhere for them to go. We just bought in a little, I think it was last year, 3 buses that we plan to convert into temporary housing. So it's things like that. You know, we are able to assess folks to be in the tiny home villages, right? And so those are some of the things that we're doing to, at the very least, create some sort of lasting and sustainable systemic change, because we, in our group, or a group of 4 people, we, you know, are trans folks making those decisions, right? And it's really important to have people representative of our community in positions of power or in positions where they're making decisions to be able to better serve our community. And so those are just some of the ways that we're able to show or to see, you know, that we're really having an impact.
In our organization, we measure the impact in a variety of ways, but one of the things that's really important is when we have a single parent who come and say to us, I would not have been able to pay my tuition and my rent had I not gotten that scholarship. Or when a student who's having difficulty in their school, and when they graduate, we see them graduating and they come back and tell us how important it was to them to have a mentor to help guide them through their very difficult time. Or when we have former students who come back to us and work with us as we're out in the community. So we find that gives us strength to carry on. But more importantly, it's really important when we see the numbers of people who look like us, who are coming to an increase within healthcare. So we know that we'll have more people who look like us, who understands us, and who will continue to carry the legacy of providing care to individuals as well as to the community.
Thank you. Doug, did you want to tackle this one?
Did you do that on purpose?
I did.
Was
I did.
okay.
I did.
That was terrible. That was awful.
I know. Okay. I'll try again. I'll try again.
No, you know, this one is it's challenging for me because I think there's so much emphasis on trying to measure the success, and I just feel like there's so many variables that are out of our control in determining what the success is, right? So, you know, whether it's providing rental assistance or just lending an ear or advocacy, you know, there's still so many things that are just out of our control, and whether or not the success actually happens. And so, and especially for a community center, right? Like the people who are going to be volunteering and working there, it's hard to measure the success because, again, there's so many things out of your control. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, the way that I look at my giving, or whether it's financial or time or effort, is what's the intent? You know, am I doing this from a grounded perspective with the intent of genuinely trying to support and to love another human being? And if I do that, like, that's all I can do, right? And so I guess the measurement of success for me individually, but also for the organization I lead, is, are we doing this with the right intent? You know, we're gonna make mistakes. We're gonna do something or say something that, you know, offends somebody or is wrong, and that's okay. But as long as we are able to admit it, to apologize, grow, and to learn from it, that speaks volumes about our original intent, and also the development of our intent going forward. And to me, that's success, because you're eliminating the confusion. You're getting the conversation out of the way, or you know, you're realizing, on, I guess, a holistic approach, that success can only really be measured one person at a time. And so it's got to start there. And so it's really hard for me to answer this question in a more analytical way because I just don't have it.
Appreciate that. Louis?
Well, I just would agree with Doug in that, you know, I think all of our efforts should be intentional. And that's where I think the measurement starts there, right? If we have an adequate amount of resources that we want to apply towards supporting or giving, as long as it's intentional, then we continually let that be our guiding principles. And there's many different ones that's going to measure the results. And for each one that measures, their results may be different, right? And while I may see the impact great, others may say, I never would have done that. Well, that's you. You go do what you do. I keep doing what I do, right? And so I think, again, to Doug's point, it's intentional. And as I say, we brought on board a community outreach specialist so that we seek opportunities where we can be impactful. And it's not always up to us, the end result, but we just do our part and continually do our part.
Here, here. I got to get on my soapbox a little bit. I know that the technical folks behind the scenes want me to shut this down quickly and get time is running out. But I'll say that when we created the Black Future Co-op Fund, it was to do exactly that, right? It was to remove the barriers to resources. Because as Doug put it earlier, he says, I can't get analytical about it. No, we should not be analytical about it, right? We have to think about what informed philanthropy. Banking institutions, academia, and corporate society informed philanthropy. And so when we impose those terms and those views on what changing people's minds and lives and hearts should look like, they aren't congruent. And so our simple metric, when we gave out the first round of $1 million from the Black Future Co-op Fund on the anniversary of the death of George Floyd, was simply to get the money into the community. We gave out $25,000 to 40 Black-led organizations across the state that said, we see you out here in these streets. We know you've been out here doing this work, and we want you to have these resources. That was our metric of success. Give them the money. In fact, there's a panel coming up later this month that's titled, Where's the Money? Because so many people have pledged money since the killing of George Floyd to Black communities. So many people have put up symbolic statements, fancy images about how they support our community, but we haven't seen the money. So I will put back on my moderator hat in closing to our panelists. Could each of you please share one type of action that people can take for community care, an action that resembles community care or an action that illustrates care for one another? We'll start with Mattie.
I will say one of the things that I always tell my partner is rest. I feel like so much of our lives and so much of our identities are rooted in our abilities to produce, are rooted in what we need to be doing and how we need to be doing it. I think that it's super revolutionary and super healing to just know when to rest, right? Know when to just be with your thoughts and navigate through the guilt that oftentimes does come with treating yourself right, with relaxing, with just doing nothing. And so that's something that I'm personally still learning. I'm oftentimes spread very thin, but I am definitely learning to really unpack that conditioning that comes with white supremacy, and then that comes with the ways in which stereotypes were placed on Black folks in terms of what we do and how we do it and how much we need to be doing it to not be seen as lazy or not be seen as unproductive. And so I'm learning to rest, and I encourage everyone to rest, to heal, to take a nap, to go on a walk, to go on a staycation, a vacation, whatever you need to do, but rest.
Frankie?
I would encourage you to care for yourself as you care for others.
Doug?
I mean, I'm on the same wavelength with Frankie and Mattie. And when you said rest, that really hit me because I'm navigating that myself. I would add also for community orientation, just to rest with each other. There's people in my life that, when I spend time with them, I'm free to be myself. It's relaxing, it's refreshing, it's revitalizing. They breathe life into me, and I need that. And so being able to rest with other people who bring that out of you, who revitalize you and heal you, I would encourage us to not only to find those people, but to spend time in communion with those people.
Lewis, take it away.
Well, I'd say each morning I wake up, I choose joy, and that's an action that's intentional. And I encourage everyone to do that. Choose joy, start your day out with joy, right? And it's a choice. The other thing that I do is, and have done, is create a bubble. And it can only contain positive energy. And if negative energy comes in, I evict it. And if I can't, I realize I'm in someone else's bubble and I remove myself. And choose joy and stay positive.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
As you've all heard in some way, shape, or form today, collective progress and community well-being are responsibilities that we as Black people hold and cannot shake even if we wanted to. It truly is ancestral. Thank you. And that's it for today's discussion. To our audience, thank you for joining us. And our panelists, Frankie, Mattie, Doug, and Lewis, thank you for your time and really vital points of view today. To all, join us next Tuesday, August 24th, for our second Black Philanthropy Month virtual conversation titled From Institutional Philanthropic Redlining to Black Freedom, featuring Black philanthropic leaders Ruby Love, Stephanie Ellis Smith, Valerie Curtis Newton, Tawana Nobles, and moderated by our very own Michelle Merriweather. These powerful women are forging new pathways to self-determination in the face of persistent racism and racist structures. Please tune in, and thank you.